My Lords, it's a pleasure to follow the noble Lord Hodgson of Ashley Abbots and to continue the trend of the afternoon of unusual coalitions across your Lordship's house after my noble friend Baroness Jones was agreeing fervently with Viscount Trenchard in the last group. And I entirely agree with everything that the noble Lord just said. I also very much agree with the two initial speeches in this group on Amendment 387, to which the Green Group would have added our backing if there was space. But in the interests of clarity and making progress, what I'm going to do is contain myself to speaking to four amendments. That's the three amendments 4, 6, 7, H, I and J, in the name of my noble friend Baroness Jones of Moulscombe, who unfortunately can't be with your Lordship's house because she's had to dash off to an emergency dental appointment. So I think we can all feel her pain. And speak to my own amendment 480. Now, I find myself in a slight structural problem in that those first three amendments are actually amendments to the Government Amendment 467G. So I think I'm going to try and explain the situation, and I hope the noble Lord the Minister will forgive me if I'm crossing over some grounds of speaking about the Government Amendment as well, and then very briefly set out the actual details of this. So the background to this is that maps of access land show people where they're allowed to exercise their current existing very limited right to roam in England. Public access to these areas are mountain, moor, heath and downland, which have been mapped according to criteria drawn up by Natural England. Now, these maps were published in 2004. Now, the Countryside and Rights of Way Act requires those to be reviewed every 10 years. So this review should have happened in 2014. Then, and we're back on the issue of deadlines we've just been discussing, the government extended that deadline by another 10 years and is now seeking to extend it to a full 25 years after the maps were first produced. So the first maps took only 4 years to produce. So why is there this delay in updating the maps, especially in the light of the government's commitment to ensure that everyone lives within 15 minutes walking distance of a green or blue space? The government has omitted in the other place that not all downland was mapped satisfactorily. This concession proves what organisations like the Ramblers have said for a long time, that there are areas of the countryside where people do indeed have the legal right to roam, but are wrongly prohibited from exercising that right because of the failure of the maps. Now, these organisations who've been working on this issue have extensive lists of mapping errors and omissions, many of which have been recognised by Natural England, but cannot be corrected until the mapping review takes place. And examples of this span from Cumbria to Northumberland, Somerset to Sussex. So, another failure in the current maps is there are access islands where the public has a legal right to roam, but there's no legal means to access the land. So unless you can parasail yourself down into it, there's no way of getting there. These valuable recreation spaces could be opened up and connected to the access network. And just to cite one example of this, there's Leckham Bassett in Oxfordshire. The mapping review could also open up more downland, particularly in southern and eastern England, which has much less right to roam than in upland areas. For example, only 0.6% of land in Kent has a right to roam, compared to 72% of the Peak District. Now, this mapping review might also open up access to waterlands and woodlands, such as the majority of Forestry Commission land that has been voluntarily dedicated as open access land. This could open up access to a good half of the population that does not have it now. So the need for a mapping review is clear. It will give more people rights to access incredible nature sites. And given that it only took 4 years to do the original mapping, it's a nonsense that it should take almost 8 more years for the first review to be completed. And finally, the Government Amendment seeks to remove the duty to conduct further reviews after this one. So it's just going to set this in stone when this one final review is done, and that's it. This looks like an exercise in the government removing a statutory duty that they've continually failed to deliver, rather than having any real justification. So these reviews should be regular and seek continual improvement, because there will, of course, be mistakes that aren't recovered until after the next review. So I'm not going to go through, noble lords can read for yourself the detail of this, but just very briefly, 467H allowing 5 years instead of 7 to complete the mapping review. Amendment J it means that there's extra right for appeals. And Amendment I allows for the continuous review process. So those are the amendments in the name of my noble friend. And I come now to Amendment 480 in my own name. And I think it's interesting that it's very rare that the two houses in this place, the other place and us, are talking about the same issue at the same time. And it's interesting that my honourable friend Caroline Lucas in the other place today had a debate on the right of access to nature. So it's really fitting that these are issues that are very much in the forefront of the public mind, that are very concerned about, and this bill gives us an opportunity to address. So what my amendment does is it's a let's have a review amendment. And you might say this is a sign of this, your Lordship's House, modifying my instincts, making me look for a middle way which goes entirely against my instincts. Because in September 2021, when we were debating what's now the Environment Act, I put down an amendment that said, right, let's have a right to roam in England. And that's still where I want to go. But I'm looking for other people to back me. I'm looking for ways in which we might make progress in your Lordship's House. So all of my amendment does this time says let's have a review in England about people's right of access to nature. Because let's not forget that in Scotland people have the right to roam over most of the countryside. Not front gardens, not growing crops, not places where they're going to do damage, but otherwise you can go where you will. By contrast, we have in England 1% of the population own half of the land. Quite a few of them, of course, are very familiar to your Lordship's House. And the other 99% have the right to roam on just 8% of the remainder. And my noble friend's earlier amendments would marginally improve that situation. This is looking to see a really big improvement. And I'm not going to talk at length, I'm aware of the time, but just 3 quick points on the benefits that we could all see from the right to roam. I was this morning at an event with the Rural Policy Group, releasing their annual Sustainable Food Report. And we were actually talking about citizen science, the kind of citizen science that the noble Lord the Minister was just praising in his wrap-up of the previous group. And we're also talking about the Internet of Things and the idea, and there was someone there talking about how brilliant it would be if we could plant sensors all over electronic sensors all over the countryside. And someone point out you've got to really fix rural connectivity to the internet before this is going to go very far. And you can use those electronic sensors to map the number of dragonflies or map the number of certain birds or butterflies. Of course, what you could also do is, if you have a right to roam, you could have groups of citizen scientists roaming around the countryside doing that mapping for you at considerably lower cost and without all of the issues around electronic technology. So, also in the Environment Act, there was a great deal of discussion about litter, but of course much of the litter in the countryside is blown or washed there, and people exercising their right to roam can clean some of that up. And finally, and undoubtedly the biggest argument of all, is the issue of public well-being, public health. And we know so much now about the need for public health to improve, and we know that right to access to nature gives that improvement.
My Lord, to support